Good morning. Would you stand with me, please? I'm going to read us a scripture, say a quick prayer, and in my brief time, hopefully put a tool in your hands to create some light in your heart so that you could create some light in the people in your churches. Father, I just pray for each of these men and women here today that as we give them this tool, you would use it for your good and for your glory. As we do good works, people would glorify you in the name of Jesus. Would you remain standing while I read this? Philippians 2, 14 and 15 says this: do everything without complaining and arguing so that no one can criticize you. Live clean, innocent lives as children of God, shining like bright lights in a world full of crooked and perverse people. I want to show you a parable today to illustrate what I'm about to do. We've got over 400 pastors registered here from almost 40 different states. And so what I would like to do is cut a line right down the middle of this auditorium. And if you're on this side of the line, would you please sit down? Everyone else remain standing. The national average of the number of Christians that is not registered to vote is about this number right here, somewhere between 25, 35, 50%, depending on what survey you look at. If you stood in your pulpit like I'm standing here today, and let's just say you had a church of about 400 people, if you asked these people to go vote, they couldn't do it. Now, I'm not saying anything prophetic about the people sitting on this side of the tables, but they couldn't even do it. They're not in the game. But let's just say 100% were. Let me show you the average Christian percentages in our churches that actually show up and vote. We don't live in a land where there's Nero that's feeding us to lions or beheading the Apostle Paul. We get to elect who governs us. It's an amazing blessing from the Lord, and many of us are apathetic sitting on our hands. In the last presidential election, the last several presidential election, you want to know what the percentage of Christians who were registered to vote that actually voted were? It's 50%, 60% at the most. Now, I would like to slice this room in half again. If you'll see the doors on either side, if you're in the back half of the room, would you please sit down? This 25% that is remaining is who votes in a non-presidential general election that decides who our Senate is, that appoints the Supreme Court justices, which several more are going to be coming up in this next election, I believe. Our Congress every 2 years, our state governors and houses, and all the way down the line. This is the number of people who are deciding who governs us. Now, if you would, everyone except these three tables right here, would you please sit down? The number one complaint that we hear from people is, I'm tired of picking between the lesser of two evils. Okay? I have to hold my nose and vote. That's why I'm over here, John. Can I tell you that the national average in this state and the states we've worked in are no different? 5% of the people in this country decide who we are going to put in a two-party system. You with me? Thank you. You may be seated. So I met Rick 15 years ago. He was bringing Governor Perry, before he was Governor Perry, into the state. He had Bo Pilgrim, David Barton, Rick, and I lived in Northeast Texas in Longview. And he said, you're an attorney. I heard about you. Would you put a pastors? You work with several pastors. Would you put a pastors coalition together? Because I was an attorney, I'd done a lot of work with Promise Keepers. I was an atheist, got saved in college by studying world religions. I did college ministries. That was my passion. Started several of those, and some of them were in Southern Baptist, some of them were in General Baptist, some of them were in non-denominational charismatic churches. And so I put together a host committee of 16 different denominations. I had African Americans, Hispanics, white pastors. I had Assembly of God, Baptist. I had pastors who had never worked before on anything come together, and we had 500 pastors at that event. As Rick mentioned to you, I think earlier, when there was redistricting about 15 years ago, I ran for Congress. There were 8 of us that were on the ticket, and I lost a runoff. I was very grateful after it was over. It's a godly man that's there, and I'm happy for that. I would have been happy with 2 of the other guys there or me. And during that process, because I knew so many pastors, several of the pastors, when I was explaining to them these statistics, they said, yeah, we've heard that, but not my church. That's somebody else's church. It's not my church. And I said, well, I don't know if it is or not. And they said, could you run our numbers? Because you can do this. You can go to the county. It's public. They don't tell you how they voted. They just tell you if they're registered. That's public. Anybody can get it at the county. And they tell you when they show up to the polls. You have to sign in. You have to literally give them your registration card, your driver's license or something, and you vote. So there's a record whether you showed up or not. So if you want to do this work yourself, you can. Well, we had spent a ton of time and money, and we had 13 counties. And so I ran the list for several pastors. I wasn't really, never dreamed I'd be standing here today before you talking about this same thing. And an amazing thing happened. I looked at the list and I was shocked. The pastors looked at the list and they were more shocked. What I'm going to tell you today is we now can do this at a national level for every one of you. If all 400 of you said, John, and I'm going to tell you how this works in a second, I want to know because I don't believe that's my church. Maybe it's not. I'm not saying it is or it isn't. I haven't found the exception yet. And we've run them in 6 different states and got 7th and 8th on the way. Here's the thing. What I saw is a shepherd is called by God to know the state of his flocks. And when he assumes the state of his flocks or assumes the state of his flocks aren't like the national state of the situation, I saw those men go into action. Now, they did it with their personality style, how they lead. They did it within their culture of their denomination or their church, and that's fine. I'm not here to tell you how to be a pastor. You know how. But I believe with all my heart, if I just show you one thing, the state of your flocks over this issue of impacting the culture, I'm not going to have to tell you what to do. You're going to go do it. We have a video here that was one of the pastors. What we do is we ask pastors, like Randy said, we don't ask you to do everything. We ask you to give us authority. We ask you to sign off. I guess my mic is spiking here. We ask you to sign off that you've read the privacy policy. We have never and will never contact your people for fundraising or anything else. There's one person, unless you give authority to somebody in your church, that will ever see that list, and that's you. Like Rick said with the tithing example, you won't know their name. Because we don't want any of you, I don't think anybody in this room would do it, going, Fred, you didn't vote. Susan, what's wrong with you? You're not even registered to vote. We don't want any of that. We want you to love them, disciple them, and the basic civic duty of getting involved. And so we have a video here. I hope they can play it for us. This is a culture impact team leader in North Carolina. We went all across North Carolina, Florida, Arkansas, Texas, about 11 states last year.
Hello, I'm Mark Andrews. I'm a member of Life Community Church in Jamestown, North Carolina. Our pastor is Jake Thornhill Jr. We started our culture impact team in early September 2014, only a couple of months before the midterm elections. Our first step was to submit our church roll to the Pew Initiative for analysis. We expected the results to be consistent with other churches, showing approximately 50% registered to vote and only 25% voting in major elections. But we were pleasantly surprised to see that 93% of our active membership was registered to vote. I began to think that our church was not typical and maybe there was no opportunity for improvement. Then I saw our voting percentage for the 2012 presidential election. Only 29% voted. That was astonishing. I met with the pastor to review the report, and Pastor Jake took the information to the pulpit. He made the case that we as Christians and we as citizens have the obligation to exercise our right to vote and to vote for godly virtues. Weeks later, after the 2014 midterms, a noticeable uptick in conservative voting was reported in our county of Guilford. I believe our church contributed to that uptick. I encourage churches to examine their voting records and inform their membership of missed obligations. With facts from the Pew Initiative, we can inform and mobilize our churches to make a difference. Thank you and God bless.
I found out about this pastor last Friday and his culture, Mark, his Pastor Jake and Mark, his culture impact team leader, asked them to do that video. They did it Saturday because we were going to come here, and I wanted to play that for you. I talked to a pastor yesterday who we ran his list, and he now has 10 people trained as culture impact team leaders. We're asking you to join us and let us give you this tool. It's a strict privacy, strict NDA. No one's ever going to know the information other than you. If you want to see me after this, I'm going to be sitting over here all day today. And what Mark doesn't know that when he did this video is that the data from his election last year, there was a 30% increase in his congregation for his pastor standing up and challenging his people to be salt and light to this nation. We're asking you to join us. If you're a pastor in this room, we will run your list. You go to pewvote.com. You have a example, a sample of this, and the steps and the privacy policy in your sack that you got. If you don't have one, we're going to be out here today. In addition, right outside these doors, there's going to be a handful of books written by Rick Scarborough, who is here, and it tells more details than he had time to share with you today about how a pastor got involved in this process. And these cards that Randy talked about that are on your table, please sign those, and on here you'll see, I want to be a Pew pastor. God bless you, and we look forward to serving you.